Welcome to the Ask Junior Daily Judgment podcast. I'm Priya Sharma, and joining me today is Arjun Gupta.
Hello, everyone. We're excited to dive into today's important judgment from the Supreme Court of India. But before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast if you enjoy our daily legal breakdowns. That's string.
That's right. Your support helps us reach more listeners and continue providing in-depth analysis of the latest court decisions. Now, let's get started with today's case. P.J. Dharmaraj versus the Church of South India and others.
This case involves a complex question about retirement age and its application to a private educational institution affiliated with a state university.
To understand the case fully, we need to break down the facts, the legal questions involved, and the court's reasoning. Arjun, can you walk us through the key facts?
Sure. P.J. Dharmaraj was appointed as a lecturer at Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University, or JNT University for short, in 1985. He was later promoted to reader in 1995. In 1998, he applied for the position of director at the CSI Institute of Technology, CSIIT, a private unaided minority institution affiliated with JNT University. He was appointed and held this position until 2018, when he was relieved of his duties.
So it's important to note that CSIIT is a private institution, but it is affiliated with a state university. This is a crucial detail that will play a major role in the court's decision. Now, what happened after Dharmaraj was relieved of his duties?
Well, Dharmaraj argued that his retirement at the age of 60 was premature and illegal. He claimed that the revised AICTE and UGC regulations, which raised the retirement age to 65 years, should be applicable to his case.
AICTE and UGC, for those who aren't familiar, are the All India Council for Technical Education and the University Grants Commission, respectively. They set standards and regulations for higher education in India. So, Dharmaraj believed that these revised regulations should have allowed him to continue working until the age of 65.
Exactly. The legal dispute arose when Dharmaraj challenged his retirement in court. The High Court, however, sided with the Church of South India and CSIT, ruling that the state regulations governing JNT University, which set the retirement age at 60, applied to CSIIT as well.
This brings us to the key legal questions at the heart of this case. What were the major issues that the Supreme Court had to address?
The Supreme Court had to determine 1. Whether Dharmaraj's retirement at 60 was in accordance with the applicable regulations governing retirement age in educational institutions in Telangana, the state where JNT University is located. 2. Whether the amended UGC and AICTE regulations regarding retirement age could be applied retroactively to Dharmaraj's case. 3. Whether Dharmaraj qualified as a teacher under the relevant regulations, given that he was the director and performed administrative duties.
These are important questions that delve into the interaction between state regulations, national guidelines, and the specific circumstances of a private institution. What was the Supreme Court's reasoning in this case?
The court's reasoning focused on a few key points. First, they recognized that while AICTE and UGC amended their regulations in 2010 to raise the retirement age to 65, these amendments weren't automatically binding on all institutions. The government of Andhra Pradesh, now Telangana, explicitly chose not to adopt the revised age limit for its universities and colleges through a specific government order in 2012.
This is interesting. So even though the AICTE and UGC set the national guidelines, the state has the power to decide whether or not to adopt them for its own institutions.
Absolutely. This demonstrates the principle of federalism, where the central government sets broad frameworks, but individual states have the authority to enact their own laws and regulations within their jurisdiction.
So in this case, Telangana chose to maintain the retirement age at 60 for its universities and colleges, even though the national guidelines had been revised. How did this impact CSIIT?
The court reasoned that since CSIIT is a self-financing, private, unaided minority institution affiliated with JNT University, it is governed by the state regulations. It's not directly subject to the AICTE and UGC guidelines, even though those guidelines might apply to other educational institutions in India.
It sounds like the court is saying that because CSIIT is affiliated with JNT University, it must follow the state's rules. What about the potential conflict between these rules and the national guidelines?
That's a very important point. The court emphasized that for a private affiliated institution like CSIIT to have a different retirement age than its parent university would create a serious anomaly, discrimination, and inequality. They argued that allowing affiliated college teachers to serve until 65 while university teachers retire at 60 wouldn't be fair or consistent.
This raises a fundamental question about the principle of uniformity. It's important for institutions within a particular system, like a university and its affiliated colleges, to have consistent rules to ensure fairness and prevent unfair advantages for some individuals.
Exactly. The court also considered Dharmaraj's role as director. They found that his duties were primarily administrative, not teaching. He hadn't provided enough evidence to demonstrate that he actively engaged in classroom teaching, which would have been necessary to be considered a teacher under the AICTE and UGC regulations.
So his role as director, even though he was previously a lecturer and reader, didn't automatically qualify him for the benefits of the revised retirement age. It seems like the court is emphasizing the distinction between teaching and administrative roles in this case.
That's right. The court pointed out that the AICTE and UGC regulations clearly differentiate between teachers and principals directors, and the extended service benefits apply specifically to those actively engaged in teaching duties.
This is a very important distinction, especially when it comes to the application of different regulations. It's clear that the court placed a lot of emphasis on the specific requirements for being considered a teacher in this case.
Absolutely. And that's not all. The court also noted that after receiving notice of superannuation, Dharmaraj made representations seeking retirement benefits such as leave encashment and gratuity. The court interpreted this as an implicit acceptance of retirement at 60 years of age, further supporting their conclusion that the original retirement age should apply.
This seems to be a case of estoppel, where Dharmaraj's actions might have led the Church of South India and CSIIT to believe that he was accepting the retirement age of 60, even though he was disputing it later.
You're right. It's a key legal principle that says if you act in a way that leads someone to believe something is true, you can't later deny it.
So what was the final decision of the Supreme Court in this case?
The court ultimately dismissed Dharmaraj's appeal and upheld the High Court's decision. They affirmed that CSIIT, as an affiliated institution of JNT University, must follow the state regulations and university policies regarding retirement age. Since the state government had chosen not to adopt the amended UGC AICTE regulations increasing the retirement age to 65, those regulations were not applicable to Dharmaraj's case. The court also concluded that Dharmaraj did not qualify as a teacher under the regulations, given his primarily administrative role and his later actions seeking retirement benefits.
This decision has significant implications for educational institutions in India, especially those affiliated with state universities. It emphasizes the importance of consistency within a system and the potential conflict between state and national regulations. It also highlights the need for individuals to clearly understand their roles and the specific regulations that apply to them.
Absolutely. To better understand this complex situation, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario. Suppose you are a teacher at a private college affiliated with a state university. The state university has its own retirement age, which is different from the national guidelines set by the AICTE and UGC. You might think that you should be able to retire at the age specified by the national guidelines. However, this case clearly shows that you must follow the state regulations set for the university with which your college is affiliated.
That's a very good example. This case also raises interesting questions about the role of private institutions in the broader educational landscape. It seems that while private institutions have a degree of autonomy, they are still subject to the rules and regulations of the state governments that govern the universities with which they are affiliated.
This highlights the ongoing debate about the balance between autonomy and accountability for private institutions. While they operate independently, they are also part of a larger system that has its own set of rules and regulations.
This is a fascinating case that sheds light on the complexities of legal regulations and their application to various sectors, particularly education. It also reminds us about the crucial role of state governments in defining policies and regulations within their jurisdictions and how those decisions can impact individuals and institutions alike.
Absolutely. And that wraps up our analysis of today's judgment. We hope you found our discussion informative and engaging.
Before we sign off, we'd like to remind our listeners once again to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you daily updates on the most important legal decisions.
Absolutely. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for another exciting episode. Until then, this is Priya Sharma.
And Arjun Gupta, signing off. Thanks for listening to the Ask Junior Daily Judgment Podcast.